right, everyone. Welcome once again to the Faces of Business. I am your host, Damon Pistolka, and I am so excited because we've got a repeat offender with us today in Ron Higgs from Wolf Management Solutions. He's going to be talking about the keys to building a leadership team for a smooth exit. Ron, thanks for coming back again and hanging out with us.
Damon, thanks for having me. I am honored to be asked to come back, to a repeat offender, come back again. This is maybe what, 4 times, 5 times?
Something like
This is
that.
great.
We just keep doing it.
I appreciate it
All
so much.
right.
This is
That's
going to be a
awesome
good
that you're here.
discussion.
Awesome that you're here. So, Ron, for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into helping people with leadership.
Wow. I'll try to make this as short as I can. I am a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy. Leadership was ingrained into my DNA since I was 17 years old. Did a 20-year career in the Navy. After that, again, all focused on leadership. I was a naval flight officer, and I was also what we called an aerospace engineering duty officer, which means I was one of the folks in the military that worked with defense contractors on future military systems. So I worked on aircraft programs, aircraft weapon and sensor system programs, and satellite programs. So I have been in leading the teams of military folks and squadrons, leading government civilians after my time in the Navy, leading groups of engineers. So I've been in leadership roles my entire career. And I have a passion for it. I also have a passion for helping others become leaders, because as leaders, I think what we need to do is create more leaders. And my goal was every place I went to leave more leaders in my wake when after I leave. I had this thing whenever I left, I would put somebody in charge. If I was the program manager, it's like, okay, you're the acting program manager. It's like, I don't want to be the acting program manager. It's like, no, you do it. You have my decision authority. We'll talk about everything when I get back. See ya.
Yeah.
So, great stuff. I mean, a lot of folks, I watched a lot of folks grow, and I found that it energized me.
That's really cool. And it is. And that, I think, is a sign of people that really enjoy leadership and do it well, is to grow other leaders.
Indeed. I really, again, I'll just emphasize it. I love it. Just watching people get it. And when you're working with people, wait until someone teaches you something you didn't know. I mean, leadership is this continuous journey of learning. And
Yes.
I may have told you this before. A few years back, I ran into a CEO, and he says, well, I've been the CEO of this company for 5 years. I know everything there is to know about leadership. I'm like, oh, okay, well, I gave him my background. I went to the Naval Academy. I spent this time in the military, and I spent a lot of time in leadership positions post-military, and I'm still scratching the surface and learning every day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a constant journey. And I think too, as you are in it longer and longer, it becomes more and more apparent the amount there is to learn. And also, when you look back, you go, boy, I wasn't very good at it when I started. But I think that's everyone.
I agree. Again, I'll go back to the military, and our system of feedback, I believe, is second to none. You're always receiving feedback in the military. Remember, in the military, we go into a unit for a finite amount of time. We're in a unit for 2, 3, or 4 years, and we know that we're progressing through that unit until you've learned what you need to learn and it's time to move on for new challenges. So you, as soon as you walk in, are being trained as a replacement. And very shortly after you, and while you're being trained, people come in after you, and now you start training your replacements. So you can't sit still. You can't worry about somebody taking your job. You know that somebody's coming in to take your job, and you're training them to be the best that they can be. So I was a coach before the term was popularized and people started calling each other coaches. So that, I think, is where the background for what I do started.
Yeah. That's really cool. So when you were in the military, what are some of the things that help the military create good leaders?
I think, well, first, let's debunk a couple things. I've had some challenges and I still do, when people will say, well, we're not looking for military style leadership. Like, well, what do you consider military style leadership? Because that's the stuff you see on TV and in the movies. And I have to tell you, that's not the way it is. So a lot of folks think they get their ideas about what military style leadership is for what they see on the big and the small screen. And it's not that way.
So what are the misconceptions there then?
I think again, if you see, I'll give you a perfect example. In any movie with that's a military organization or paramilitary organization, like the police or Starfleet, right? One character will look at another character and say, that's an order. Like, I, in my military career, never said that. I've never had to say that. And I do believe if you have to tell somebody that at some point you've failed in leadership. So that's one. And all of our positional authority. There may be some folks out there that think that people just listen to you just because of your positional authority. Remember, in the military, we lead people into situations to where we know everyone isn't coming back. So do you think these folks are doing what I asked because I told them to, or I've built up their confidence in themselves, in me, built a level of trust that they are all going to come back? So
Yeah.
that's a big difference.
Yes, that's a huge difference when you put it in those terms, because you're right. Loss of life is not uncommon in the military.
As the events of last night showed us, not just the military, but others.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. So we're here to talk about the keys to building a leadership team for a smooth exit, and your passion for building leadership teams, and specifically working with the founders and the executive leadership teams. What are some of the most common situations you see when you're asked to come in and assess a situation, leadership teams and the founders?
If they have a team, well, one, do they have a
They
team?
have team. Yeah. Yeah.
Are they big enough to have a team? The second one is if they have people, and this does happen in startups. If there's an org chart, if I say, may I see your org chart, I may get some crazy looks like org chart, what's that? And that's a flag. And then if they do have an org chart, it just has names on it. And you and I have discussed this before. The org chart will say Damon is responsible for this, Ron is responsible for this, and it's just names. And there may not be any rhyme or reason to what those folks are doing. Right? So first thing is we have to build an organizational structure that serves the company. In larger companies, it ends up being some of the issues are conflict within the executive team. That's a big one because that conflict within the executive team can really trickle down to the entire business. If two executives hate each other, then that permeates throughout the whole business. I've seen this happen where if you have a CMO and a sales, CRO hate each other or something crazy like that, then the teams themselves be like, hey, we don't talk to marketing people, we don't talk to salespeople. Those things, it just ruins the culture. So there are some companies that experience those sorts of issues as well.
Yeah. And that's a great example that the first of all, the structure. We'll talk about that a little bit more again here in a moment. But those conflicts, man, they can just really undermine. If I'm sitting there as the CEO, founder, whatever, and I've got a couple of my executive team members that don't like each other and hide it well enough that I really don't see it day in and day out, it can cause havoc.
Yeah, there's such a hidden cost to that. It impacts your bottom line. It impacts your culture. ultimately impacts retention. Top talent leaves.
Yeah.
You get a reputation. Maybe people don't want to come. You have trouble recruiting. I mean, all sorts of issues stem from that. And we've probably all been in organizations that we've seen that. Or you may have been driven yourself, been driven away from a company because those kinds of issues were happening.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back to keys to building a leadership team for a smooth exit. You know, you've talked before we got on today and then other times about there's several steps to this process. So let's go through the steps and then let's talk through each one of those steps a little bit.
Yeah. So remember before last time I was on, we talked about big picture in terms of, well, where do you even start? So one, as I talked about earlier, is building the right structure, the organizational structure that serves the company. So that's ops department, HR, marketing, all of those different things. And then what we're here to discuss today, now that you have that, putting the right team in place. That means putting the right people in those positions that you've just created. And additionally, especially when companies are smaller, you need to have the right processes in place. As when companies are small, especially when they have very few people, very few clients, very few products or services, life is easy because they're delivering their product or service in this environment of simplicity. As they start to grow, they have to now deliver this product or service in an environment of relative complexity driven by the numbers of people, the numbers of people they have, the number of clients, the number of products, service. Things just start to become complex, and you need a process, a system, and a process to not just do it, but make sure that you do it right and it's repeatable. Because when you're small, you can almost afford to make it up every time. And I'm sure everybody's been in a situation like this, and you turn around and go, haven't we done this 20 times before? Why does it seem like we're making it up every time we do it? Right? So
Yep.
we've all been in that situation. That's when you start to have to need systems and processes.
Yeah, that's a great point. The systems and processes and yeah. Yep. So as you're looking at the team components, we're talking about the team itself. We're talking about you've got a structure. You've taken the time to lay out the roles, and now you're looking at the team. You're looking at the people across the team. What are some of the aspects when doing that you really want to keep in mind when you're looking at your team or you're building out your team, and because you know that this is what we need to go, we got to do something to get to the next level.
Right. So first, I'll back up a little bit. Remember that organizational structure has to be clear, and it has to clearly define who's responsible for what. So those roles and responsibilities have to be clear. And I'll give you an example. When I work with teams that are in conflict, the first thing we do, and it seems silly, is let's go over all of our individual job, roles, what's written down. Okay. And then what do you really do? Because I think it's important for the executives to understand their job and understand all the other executives' jobs. And a lot of the conflict is driven by overlap in those roles and responsibilities, or perceived overlap in those roles and responsibilities. And it may stem from something that happened in the past. So in the past, say on my job description, it says I'm responsible for the TPS report, but you've been doing the TPS report for the last couple of years. Going back, whoever had the job before you was doing the TPS report because the person in my role, the CEO, says, I don't like the way he does the TPS report, so I want this other person to do it. And so it doesn't necessarily make sense role-wise, but it's something that happened a while back because they were making up for, one human being not doing it to somebody's liking or not being capable of it, which means you had the wrong person in the wrong person in the wrong seat. So
Yes.
those are those overlaps, and those overlaps really cause a lot of the conflict. So one, you really have to understand those roles and make everything very, very clear. The next thing is to have the right people in the right seats. The first time one of my clients I worked with was like, hey, my team is good, but they're not great. We need to get them to work better together. I want them to be great. Said, okay. So the first thing I asked is like, so does everyone in the room belong there? Do you have the right people in the right seat?
Mm-hmm.
Is there anyone there that you have a question about or that's struggling or you think is in over their head? Long pause. I go, well, we're not going to be able, the best way for us to move forward is to have all of the right people in the room from the beginning.
Yeah.
She ended up demoting that person.
Yep. And that's a tough one because,
It is.
they could be people that have been there a long, long time. And I'm glad you segued into this, because one of the things that I think owners, high level executives that have started a business and grown it considerably with some of these people that were started in the beginning. Literally, it could be the other person in the room when they started the business, but they're an employee, and now we're 5 years down the road, and that person is like a fish out of water and is not comfortable with what they're doing, and really is not a fit for what the company needs anymore. Talk about that just a little bit.
Well, stage of growth. So the analogy that I use is that the people who build the foundation aren't necessarily the people that build the house. Right?
Mm.
And then I said that to a colleague who I met in person for the first time recently at a coffee shop. And her response to that, she goes, that's great. I use this analogy because she's from the Seattle area. She said, the person that gets you to the top of Mount Rainier isn't the person that can get you to the top of Mount Everest. And so I think those are really good examples of just having the right people at the right time. So you have some foundation builders out there and you have some people that can help you scale. You're right, that is tough because they may have helped found the company. They were there when things were tough.
Yeah.
So those are the hard decisions that have to be made because when you're going to, for lack of a better term, grow up, not everybody's going to make the trip with you. And that is very difficult. And as a CEO, I'm sure some people out there have had to make really difficult people decisions. And that is part of the job.
Yeah. Yeah. That is, and I'm glad you said it the way you did. The person that builds a foundation is not the one that's going to build the house. And it really happens a lot in business. I think when you talk to a owner or CEO where the business has stagnated, if they haven't thought about roles and responsibilities and who are in the seats at that point, I think they're often overlooking the root cause of what they're experiencing. And even if they should look in the mirror.
Yes. So another example of this is that I had a client demote someone, and then I asked, was the person relieved? And they thought back and went, yes. So here you had a person who was in over their head, but did not want to disappoint the CEO by saying, I'm in over my head. I can't handle this. Keep trucking on. CEO didn't want to disappoint that person by demoting them, when in reality, that's what they both wanted and needed. So the person who got demoted was relieved.
Yes.
And ended up being put in a better position and thrived in that position.
That's
So
really,
you're not talking about, you don't have to necessarily get rid of people. You just may have to put them in a role that's more suitable for their capabilities.
and that is a great point, because that same person that was there with you in the beginning, if you ask them to do something that they may not like, they might say yes just because they say, I really need to help do this because this is what I've done forever. And then they are 3 years down the road in something they don't like.
Right. I
And
think, as you well know, people operate best when they're engaged, when they do things that they love.
yes, yes. So as you're helping people through this and you're getting these people in the right spots or helping the leaders to understand the right roles, what are some of the really tough things you encounter when you're like, we see this team, we know what we need to do, but we just can't get there?
Well, ultimately, as a consultant, as a coach, I make recommendations, my clients make decisions. And a lot of those things are tough and difficult to get past.
Mm-hmm.
I have an example where, some people, as the company starts to grow and as you start building this organizational structure, clearly defining roles and responsibilities, some people lose their autonomy, right? That's what we all like, is autonomy. A lot of folks are scared of losing their autonomy and they push back on everything. So I was in a situation to where lots of pushback, lots of just stonewalling all the things that we're trying to do. I'm trying to help with to move the company into a position to where it was scale.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, I had to have a discussion with the CEO saying, as long as this person is in that role in this company, you're not going to be able to move forward, right? That person is holding you back, right? And they're not going to change. It's like, but he's my best friend and he helped me start the company. Well, my work here is done. So, I
Yeah.
mean, as a consultant coach, you've probably had to walk away from clients before. And,
Yeah.
and it wasn't necessarily walk away. It was a mutual agreement that, well, I think we've reached an impasse here. The other thing is that not every company needs to grow to be a behemoth. So there's a
Yeah.
certain point to where you can go and scale and keep scaling. And then there's a certain point where you get through and you just can't break through to start to scale. It's like we're stuck. We're stuck at between $8 and $10 million. It's perfectly okay to be stuck at $8 to $10 million in revenue and not grow. So then you can focus on other things. You can focus on being more efficient. You can focus on increasing your margins. You can do that. And that's what that company ultimately decided to do with that person. And it was great because now they knew that they were no longer seeking, we're going to build this thing and we're going to scale. No,
Yeah.
we're actually okay and we're fine staying at this point that we are. So now let's focus our efforts on doing better work and not necessarily growing.
That's a good point because, not everyone really, even though they think they may want to scale, not everyone really wants to scale once they understand what it takes. And
That's the biggest thing because almost guaranteed you're going to lose people. And
yes,
those decisions are too hard for folks.
yeah, yeah. So one of the things that we'll talk about here for just a moment, and then we'll roll into, what you really want your leadership team to look like for a smooth exit, is a little bit about culture and extremely talented people that are not good for your culture. Because I think a lot of smaller companies often fall into this trap that, you know, our culture is not where we want it to be because our leadership team or someone on their leadership team is undermining some things. But Damon's really talented and he just makes stuff happen. What do you How would you coach someone through that situation? Because that, I think, comes up a lot, and it's something that scares the heck out of founders and CEOs, and is something that causes way more damage than they ever realize.
Yeah, so there are a couple of categories of people that you have out there, right? You have some people that have potential, as we say, but they're coachable and they can be taught, they can learn. And a lot of us, you have that whole system of values, your company values, and that's what you hire for, right? Everything else you can teach, or most everything else can teach. So you look for things that you can't teach. You can't teach work ethic, you can't teach motivation, you can't teach curiosity and or willingness to learn, things like that. You can't teach that, right? So you look for those types of things and then focus on the things that you can teach. You have to make decisions about some people. Are they coachable, and do they share our values? Then yes, that's the person we're going to keep. So here's the thing: the superstars, or they may not be superstars. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's those people out there who are really, really great at what they do, but they're toxic and they don't align with your values. So do you want to keep people around that don't align with your values? That means we've all seen this. So and so is the top salesperson, but everybody hates them. They go around the processes. They may do some inappropriate things, but they put up with it because they're the top salesperson. You just threw your value system out the window because you get more of what you tolerate. So that person is going to be a cancer in your organization, even though they're performing. We've all seen this. That person needs to either be reassigned, and in some cases reassigned out of the company. I mean, but some serious coaching about values alignment. I mean, those are the extremes. And then there are people that just kind of like aren't good. They aren't good at what they do and they're not coachable. So they're out. I mean, that's,
that's an easier decision, I think. That's for sure.
That's easy. So if you think about it that way, there's no way to sort of eliminate the hard decisions that are going to be made. But I do think the kinds of people that I just described, the high performers that don't align with your values, I would guess that everyone has seen that at some point in their career. Witness someone who just, who everybody, I won't say they hated, they were just good. They made all the sales, they did everything, but they were difficult to work with, didn't follow the rules, and just got away with murder.
Yeah.
And what did that do to your culture?
And in the performance of the other people that have to work around them.
Right. How many people did that person drive away? How did that impact your talent? How did it really impact your bottom line?
Yeah.
They're making sales, but at what cost?
Yeah. I remember years ago, someone said, and I about the time they said this, I really realized how long they would be a leader. As they said, well, sometimes you just have to, you have to put up with those talented people that aren't very nice, or something to that effect. And you could tell that was the prevailing attitude in the company, because it was not a great place for people to work because of that. And you had about 1 million different values, people allowing, like you said, you get more of what you tolerate. They tolerate an awful lot in a lot of directions. And those organizations don't retain, I would bear it to say, even good people for the most part, and can only will only retain the people that have to stay there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And you've seen it too. There are some people that come into work for a paycheck.
Yes. That's what you get.
100% of their motivation is for the paycheck. Come in, do their job, the bare minimum required, and go.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that's awesome so far here, Ron. Now I'm excited because we're going to turn our adventure into building this leadership team for a smooth exit. Now we're talking to people that they're going to be 2, 3, 5 years ready for this exit. What are some of the things specifically beyond, we've got an org structure, we've developed roles, we've got our team, we think we've got some people in the seats. Now, what do we really need to be working on?
Well, one, this is not just for an exit, as you well know. This will increase the value of any business. This will increase the efficiency of any business with this. But a couple of the things, and a lot of companies don't have this. And when I introduced the concept, I think I've only been with one client so far that already had one of these, which is an effective decision-making process. Let's decide how we're going to decide, right? How do you make decisions? How does the team make decisions? And you have to look at a couple things. One is internal customers. That's another thing that some folks don't think about. Who's your internal customer? What kind of interactions are you having with internally amongst your executives where decisions have to be made? And if that needs to be escalated, when are you going to escalate it? How are you going to escalate it? Who are you going to escalate it to? So let's say if the production person and the ops person or something have a disagreement, they decide, okay, we're going to take it to the COO. And the COO will help us. And if we can't decide the COO, then all three of us will go to the CEO. The other thing. And then once you, in the big team meeting, are we going to have a majority? Are we going to have a super majority? Are we going to have a unanimous? Are we going to have consensus? Whatever it can, or are we just going to let the C, or do we make a recommendation to the CEO and have the CEO make the final call? Sounds simple, but having that decision-making process in place really, really helps things along, because then everybody understands how you make decisions.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I remember, I don't know, I've heard it several times about decision making and pushing that decision making to the lowest levels possible. And something to, I forget, one of the hotel chains, the better hotel chains, had a while ago anyway, had given their people that work anywhere in the hotel a certain amount of money they could allocate, I don't know, over a given time period to solve problems for people, and give that decision-making process to those people that were closest to the customer. And I think when you talk about these things, we don't often think about the decision-making process itself. And that's why it's great for you to bring it up, because how does, like you said, how does a ops manager know what they can decide and what they shouldn't be able to decide or shouldn't decide? What the ownership or the CEO wants them to decide or not one. How does a customer service person know what they can decide? And when they're interacting with a customer, there's all these decision steps all the way up the chain that if they're clear, everybody knows what to do. If I'm a customer service person, if I have a $100,000 order, I may have to go get some approvals, and my boss may even have to get some approvals. But it could be that I know, hey, this is what we do in this situation. As long as the money is about this much, we're good. And that's a great point, because in a leadership team, if you don't know this, I'm sure you've seen where one person making a decision and someone else making another one and someone making a third causes some confusion.
Absolutely. And then also bottlenecks, right? You don't want to be a bottleneck.
Mm-hmm.
As a COO, you don't want to. I was in a structure where I came in as a COO, but there was another person, they had a different structure before where it was a managing partner. Managing partner did all of the proposals, let's say, all sorts of different things, right? So bottleneck there. So we worked on the process. We had account managers. What happens? Change orders are big when you're doing proposals. You got a client, you got everything. And what escalates? We have this problem in engineering, we have it everywhere. What customer request? What is it that escalates it to a change order? Because they always ask for a little more, a little more, a little more. So now we're going to have to do a change order. So previously they had to wait for me or the person in my position to do it. And so I just gave the account manager the authority to sign a change order.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Easy, right? But like, oh, we hadn't thought about that before. Am I comfortable with that? Yeah, because that's also part of that person's growth. Because I always looked at my job as a leader to help everyone in the company achieve what they needed to achieve for their next job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So giving them more responsibility would help them when they're ready to promote. So just by pushing that decision down, we were able to get change orders and proposals out a lot faster.
Yeah.
Simple simple example of something that was really able to streamline a process and break a bottleneck that existed.
Yeah, because if you had 100 change orders going and you had 10 of those managers that had each one had 10 change orders going and they all had one person, it could be really slow.
Absolutely, especially if that person is traveling, PTO, things
Yeah.
like that. Everything just came to a screeching halt. One of the other small things in that example was there was always more than one person that could sign off on anything. And
Mm-hmm.
so you didn't have to wait for a human being. The whole train didn't come to a stop when one human being is absent.
Yes. Yes. And that's important because just as we said, people are going to go on vacation. People are going to get sick. Things are going to happen when they're out of the office. It could be a client meeting, whatever it is. And thinking about that as you're building a leadership team that's going to be able to operate a business smoothly, you have to think of those contingencies.
Absolutely.
So as we move beyond this, Ron, let's talk about the owner that really wants this team that's going to enable a smooth exit or a well-running business. What are some of the things that they're going to start to see happening, or the final things that they're really going to do? Now they've got roles and responsibilities. They've got the right people in the right place. They talked about the decision process. Now, what are some of the other things they want to ensure within their leadership team for that smooth exit or a better running business?
This is counterintuitive, but you want the owner to feel more and more unneeded around here. Like, because you and I discussed this, the owner will typically end up being a decision bottleneck, a sales bottleneck, technology bottleneck, or a relationship bottleneck. So you don't want that. If things are happening and no one's coming to ask you, nobody's coming to for you to bail them out or anything, that's where you want to be. To back up a little bit, one of the other things with that team, you build that team and you have an effective team. One of the best ways to ensure that the team stays effective, and we've seen this before, is to make sure that the team is all unified. So, along with that decision making process comes people should be whatever the decision process is. If you decide that it has to be unanimous, okay. I think that decision right there holds a lot of businesses back, making sure that everybody has to agree. I don't think so. People should be willing to be outvoted.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things I got along great in most of the teams that I was on because I was always willing to be outvoted. I was like, hey, I'm gonna give you my concerns, but if everybody else, votes same way, then I'm on board. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the thing. Everyone needs to realize that team, especially that leadership team, that's the first team. You're not there to represent ops. You're not there to represent finance. You're not there to represent production. You are there to lead the business. That is your first team. So prioritizing company interests over your individual departmental concerns is paramount, right? And
Yeah.
then once the decision is made collectively using whatever decision process you came up with, everyone walks out and supports that decision as if it's the one that they made, right? And communicates it that way too. Because as soon as you walk out rolling your eyes and going, oh, the team decided to go do this, I think it's a stupid idea, but I guess we got to do it, right? So that's it. You just undermine everything. And I've seen that a bunch. That was one thing in the military that we learned early on was that once commander makes a decision, that's it. Everybody supports it. And so you lead with one, the team leads with one voice. And you can't afford for people to come out and undermine what the collective has decided. And that's tough, especially a tough pill to swallow, especially if you did not support the decision that was made.
Yeah, but it is, I think this is a critical piece in a long performing team, because if you have a team that will do this and believe in it and work that way over time, you get used to getting outvoted once in a while. and it gets more comfortable as a leader at that point and saying, well, this is what I think, but I want to hear what other people think so we make the best decision. And it's funny because it happened to me this morning, and I was the one that I was like, you're right, I'm not right. This is not what we should do. And I think it's partly the highest level leader needs to demonstrate that to the team, that whatever decision making process is, even if it means the highest level leader is outvoted at this point, and they're going to move forward the way the team wants to, doing that a few times enables everyone else to see how they should really do it.
It also helps build that trust, because this is important, where they have to start building that trust and working together, and also creating that that environment of psychological safety, the buzzword, right? You want everybody to feel comfortable to say their piece, to disagree with everything, to be the contrarian, for somebody to raise their hand and go, I think that's a stupid idea, and here's why. But back it up respectfully, and then respectfully listen to everyone.
Yeah.
And we all learned something in all of those things. And just like you did this morning, wow, you know what? That's total wrong way to go. And I've learned that. And there's some things you can also consider are the decisions is the decision that we're about to make reversible, right? So is it a reversible decision? If it is, there's really nothing wrong with learning a hard lesson, turning around and going, we made the wrong decision. Now we're going to go back and do this. Let's move forward. Let's take it as a point of learning, and move forward.
Yeah, that's really good. So that unity amongst the leadership team is critical. And I think that you're right there. And by the highest level leader, if they can keep encouraging that and working on it, and then also having one of the things that I've seen, and when you talk about this unity amongst the leadership team, is really when the highest level leader sees an individual on their leadership team that is not part of that team like that and not supporting that unity, they have to have those tough conversations, because you will cause, if you want a smooth running business, you have to have people in there working together.
That's right. But that's important as far as you onboarding your executive onto the leadership team, right? That's part of it. That's the discussion that you have to have when bringing that person aboard. When they get that promotion, offered that promotion, here's what your responsibility is going to be. This is now your first team. This is how we make decisions. Is that going to work? Right? Because the minute I see that you're not supporting that, everyone in the team has to.
Yeah. Yep.
Again, tough decisions to be made. I'm sure all the CEOs out there have been in difficult situations.
Yeah. Yep. So when you see this work really well, what's cool stuff that happens? What are things that are happening? You go, man, they're doing it right.
When they genuinely, you can tell when they're genuinely enjoy each other's company, when they can sit around and say whatever they need to say and understand that it stays in that room. There's no personal attacks. There's nothing. And people learn something. They learn from each other. I always had this goal of learning from everyone around me, all the other leaders, even people that work for me. I want to learn something from everyone around me. When those folks are interacting well, and they're getting along great personally, they're making hard decisions, they're not scared to bring up. All of us have those situations where there's an elephant in the room and nobody wants to bring it up. But when some of them will start with that. Okay, hey, we can't let this fester any longer. We're going to have to talk about this, right? And then when they disagree with each other, like, hey, Damon, you really let me down, and here's why. You said that you would have this done by Friday, and Friday came and it wasn't done. And what I would have expected from you is on Thursday for you to say, Ron, I'm not going to have it done on Friday. I'm not going to be able to get it done till Monday. Here's why. Apologies. Let's deal with that. Not just letting me do that. And those relationships, when people no personal attacks, right? When they can work with each other and look at each other and go, yeah, I screwed that up or I let you down.
Yeah.
How often do people say that?
Yeah, that's a good one. I mean, because when someone says that without being provoked at all and just said, I really made a mistake here and own up to it in a team setting, in a room with several people or many people, and sometimes that really does strengthen the bond between those people working and show that they care about each other.
I believe so. And then ask people to hold you accountable. They're asking each other to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
Hey, I let this down, and here's the things that I'm trying to get better at. I need your help to hold me accountable. So if I am screwing this up, and if I'm not doing this on time and I'm not doing it, I need you to tell me. Don't let me get away with it.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Have a similar discussion with my wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't let me get away with that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one, because and that's a lot of things are applicable in a lot of areas. I'll just say that.
Yeah.
So as we go back, and we're gonna summarize. I'm gonna summarize quickly here, Ron. It's about time for us to round up the show today. So in building a leadership team for a smooth exit or a better running business, there are some things that I think that we can look at that you covered here. It was about building the org structure. First of all, do you have an organizational structure? And then then after that, you talked about the getting the right people in the right, or having the roles and getting the right people in those roles. And then the third part was get your decision-making process clear, and then get unity amongst the leadership team with clear communication.
Yes.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah, all sounds good. One thing I will say in the decision-making process, and this is something I just thought about. In the decision-making process, when companies are small, they can use anecdote and gut feel to make decisions. At some point, the company has to grow, and then the decisions have to be data-driven. They have to be data-driven decisions. And where is the data coming from? What's the truth data for that decision? And some decisions can't fester. Some things have to be made quickly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's things to do that. That's more into the how than the why. But I thought that was worth mentioning as far as that data-driven decisions, because those become really important.
There will be a point that you have to use that because it's too big to use gut feel anymore, or too complex to use gut feel anymore. That's for sure. Well, Ron, I just want to thank you for being here again today, talking about the keys to building a leadership team for a smooth exit. If someone wants to get a hold of you, what's the best way to find you?
Thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it. Again, especially being a repeat offender, as you say. I am on LinkedIn. That is my channel. You can find me on LinkedIn. Look for the airplane picture. Reach out, shoot me a question, anything. I'll do my best to help you or point you towards the right person that can, or just follow me and engage with some of my posts. That would be greatly appreciated.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, again, we had Ron Higgs here today. Go back. If you didn't listen to the whole thing, go back from the beginning. He dropped a lot of great leadership content, information, ideas for you to improve your leadership team. I want to say thanks for Usman for being here today. Greetings from Usman. Thanks for being here today. We had someone else. I can't see who it is, but they dropped by and said hi as well. Thank you for being here today. Ron, we'll finish up offline. Thanks, everyone. We'll be back again with another incredible guest.
Thanks, Damon.